And yes, I will admit it, you are my favorite chamber. So I am so honored to be with you today, and it is a joy to be back in Iowa and on the road and doing the 99 county tour. Chuck and I do this every year. We're out connecting with Iowans in all of our counties, from the biggest to the smallest and everything in between, and it is a real blessing just to be home and on the road. And of course, we have the magnificent Field of Dreams game this evening. I did see A-Rod, and yes, he was getting a cup of coffee. So thank you, Chamber, for helping him with his coffee needs this morning. But anyway, so I'm just going to run through a number of the issues that we are facing, and I know you're feeling a lot of these pressures as well, and some of the things that we're doing in Washington, D.C. to try and alleviate some of the pains that we feel here across the Midwest. But one of the things that I have been hearing a lot about as I'm out on the tour is the rate of inflation and how hard it has hit our Iowa businesses and our rural communities. And just recently, I shared this a few weeks ago, but just recently it's been brought to light that so many Iowans right now, because of the inflation, the cost of goods and groceries, and the cost of gas, especially for those that are in the rural communities commuting a long distance to their jobs, a number of them have started turning to pawn shops now. They're pawning their jewelry and their electronics to pay for gas. And so this is kind of a big thing in southwest Iowa right now, and it just really highlights the fact that we have many communities that are really struggling right now, and families that are struggling to pay for food for their kids, and now that we're facing school supplies and so forth. So one issue and one reason I think we do have such a huge rate of inflation right now is that our federal government has been pumping a lot of money into a very hot economy. And we have seen this time after time after time where these spending packages are coming into the Senate, they're coming into the House, and it's not just smaller millions or billions of dollars. We are talking about multi-trillion dollar packages that are passed not even with bipartisan support. It's just being passed because they can pass them. So there's very little input from both parties in Washington, D.C. They're strictly partisan. And we've got to get away from that. And we have to start working for our constituents. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle we're on. We have to do the right thing. And continuing to pump unnecessary dollars into this economy, trying to reduce the rate of inflation, which the last package we have is called the Inflation Reduction Act. Even Bernie Sanders said this is the so-called Inflation Reduction Act because the Congressional Budget Office came back and said this will do nothing to reduce inflation. So here we spent another $750 billion that was really not necessary. So it's coming up in the House tomorrow. I believe they will be voting on this so-called Inflation Reduction Act. We are in a recession, folks. No matter how you twist and turn the definition, we are in a recession right now. So we shouldn't be spending just billions of dollars just on nice-to-have wish list items. So part of the conversation that we're having as well, I mentioned it, the cost of fuel, just fuel. I mean, all of us have vehicles, right? And most of us don't have the luxury of an electric vehicle. And if you want to own an electric vehicle, you know, that's great. It's all about consumer choice. But certainly most families in Iowa rely upon a vehicle that has an internal combustion engine. And so when they're pulling up at the fuel pump, they're recognizing that I can't keep up with the cost of fuel. We have seen the cost drip down a little bit. I think we're at maybe $3.99 a gallon. We hit a high of around $5.02 a gallon, but $3.99 a gallon is still a lot It's still a lot. So one of the issues I'm working on with Senator Grassley and our Democratic colleague, Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota, is an effort to leverage higher octane fuels to improve our engine efficiency and performance. And so we're doing this by pushing more ethanol and biodiesel. We want to allow the sale of fuels that contain more ethanol. We want to sell more biodiesel, get all of this out into the fuel supply, and that in turn will lower our cost at the pump. So we're really excited about it. It's bipartisan legislation. It will move America closer to our own energy independence, which is something, again, that in recent years we have really seen the federal government tighten down on, is our energy independence. You know, less pumping, drilling here in the United States of America. So in light of that, let's really promote our biofuel producers and our farmers. So we'll work on that. One other issue that I want to bring up, because it's a great bill that was highlighted by Senator John Thune not too long ago. He brought it to my attention. I decided to sign on to it as well, and that's the Food and Energy Security Act, and it requires that federal financial and securities regulators, they will need to estimate the impact of their regulations on businesses in agriculture or the energy supply chain. What we see is just an incredible amount of regulation coming from the federal government, and especially now in the areas of agriculture and energy, both of which we have huge industries here in Iowa. So I'm glad to be working with Senator Thune on that issue. Some of the other issues I'm going to touch on briefly: small business, huge here in Dubuque, right? So I hope come next January, I hope to be the chairman. If I'm not the chairman, I will be the ranking member on the Small Business Committee in the Senate, in the United States Senate. So I am really excited about the opportunity we have to highlight some of the challenges that our small Iowa businesses are facing, and I'm ready to lead the committee. So it doesn't get a lot of attention, but the committee does some really, really important work, especially for the business community, like I said, here in Iowa and many of our other more agriculturally driven states. So during COVID, some of our members helped create the Paycheck Protection Program, and I know that that was a really important program throughout Dubuque and the surrounding areas. And the Small Business Administration also had another program. It was called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. This was a really popular program as well. But one issue that I hear a lot about from our Iowa businesses, especially from our restaurants, is a fund that was related to the restaurant business called the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So restaurants and other small businesses that were facing the economic hardship through COVID, they could apply for some of these government-provided fund opportunities. And the reason we did that was because as a government, we closed those businesses down. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing the supports necessary to keep those employees on payroll and to make sure that those businesses had an opportunity to open once COVID-19 had passed. So it is really important, even though we had these great programs, it is important that we have oversight of the programs and make sure that the dollars were being spent appropriately. And what we have found is in a number of these programs through the Small Business Administration, we did see fraud. I mean, it just happens. People see an opportunity and they take advantage of it. So the wrongly awarded dollars are dollars now that we want to go back and recoup, because there is still a need out there. There were a number of businesses that were applying for, say, the economic injury disaster loan that weren't granted dollars. So some of those dollars that were fraudulently used, we can direct them to those that actually did have a need for those dollars. So I am working with the Small Business Administration and really pushing them to make sure we're pulling back in those improper payments, and then we can redistribute the improper to the payments to those that did qualify but weren't able to get part of those dollars because they had been expended. So we're going to keep working on that. That will be one of my big pushes once we move forward in this next year as well. It's just the responsible thing to do. And again, we need to make sure that the taxpayer dollars that are out there, they are doing the right work and not being improperly rewarded to businesses that didn't meet the criteria. So it's just a quick laundry list. I'm sorry I ran through it very fast, but I know that you have a lot more fascinating questions for me to get at. So with that, I am going to yield my time here at the podium. I'm going to Chad.
Yep.
And I'm going to hear a lot of really awesome questions, I know, from my favorite chamber in the state of Iowa.
Oh, shucks. Yes, a couple of... Yes, a couple of other items here. Wanted to introduce some wonderful folks that represent our city as well. So Katie Wethel, if you can give a wave. Is she still here? There she is. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate you. And then also our new Chief of Police, Jeremy Jensen. Are you still here with us? There we are. Oh, they're together.
Yeah.
Yes, all right.
Woo.
Thank you for being
here. The
here.
weight of the world on your shoulders, Chief.
Yeah. You're new,
Thank
but in that
you.
kind of role, I don't think you get to say that you're new, right?
Thank you. God bless you and your department. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
So to get us started here, we did have a question that came in on the wire here, so start putting your thinking caps on. But the first question, to your point on inflation, is inflation has been hitting families and small businesses hard over the past few months. While the Fed is working aggressively to address this issue, what can Congress do to continue to alleviate inflationary pressures, for instance, in the supply chain, to protect American consumers and business owners alike?
Yeah, there's so many opportunities that have just been missed and things that we need to act on and be more proactive rather than reactive. Some of the issues through supply chain can be alleviated through discussions on tariffs. We still have a lot of tariffs on products that are coming into the United States, and if some of that can be renegotiated, even just for a while to alleviate some of those pressures, those are discussions that we could be having right now. So I've had a number of phone calls with our U.S. Trade Rep, Catherine Tai, about the tariff issue. And one that our farmers are facing too is like an example of fertilizer. So I have been on those calls. I know other members have been on those calls. I think Chuck Grassley has had calls with Catherine Tai as well. The only commitment that we will get coming from that office is we'll look into it, but then never any follow-up. So a lot of questions are hanging out there as far as what's the trade rep's responsibility in working with some of these countries to alleviate at least the import-export issues. And again, looking at other regulations, are there ways that we can alleviate some of the supply chain issues, whether it's transportation? Some of it is because we don't have the same number of drivers that are delivering large loads like we did pre-pandemic. During COVID-19, a lot of the older drivers that were CDL qualified decided now is a really good time for me to retire. And they did. And the sad thing was, at that point, we did not have truck driving schools open. We didn't have the opportunity necessarily for testing. So there's got a little bit of a choke point there. So if we as a federal government can really open back up and really start encouraging those types of trades, those driving programs, getting people out there, would be great. But part of that is easing up on some of the requirements that were hanging out there. As we were coming out of the pandemic, the federal government actually came back and put more requirements on those that were trying to get CDLs. I thought it was a really bad time to do that. Why don't we wait until we've got people in the pipeline and then ease them in instead of having a heavy hand and slapping it down on them as we're trying to recover. So simple things like that we should be doing, and thinking through, okay, this action sounds great, but what is it actually going to do for those businesses that need goods? So we've got to be a little more common sense when it comes to some of these approaches. But I could go on because there are a lot of things in the federal government we could be doing, should be doing. We have asked for a lot of things at the federal level. So far, we haven't seen a lot of responsiveness, excuse me, coming from the administration and those agencies. Thank you. Okay, you had a reprieve. Yes.
The very first one. Yeah, I know. Senator Grassley is facing re-election. Would you give us some thoughts on the teamwork that the two of you coordinate with, and your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, I can. And as I'm out and about, oh, Molly, God bless you. See why you're my favorite chamber? Thank you. I needed that. Thank you so much. So there is a great level of teamwork between Senator Grassley and I appreciate him so much because there are times when we are going through some decision-making processes that he will just shoot me a message and say, hey, can you swing by my hideaway? And let's have a conversation about this particular bill or, this effort that we have. And we try and be on the same level, same messaging. And I'll be honest, sometimes Senator Grassley and I may not even vote the same way. We might have different ideas on how something should be accomplished. But we always try and work together, and we're not pushing against each other in our messaging. He's extremely respectful of me, and I have the greatest admiration for Senator Grassley. And I love that, he has a number of years in the United States Senate. Let's put it like that. He's got a number of years in the Senate. But what I have found so valuable is that he has a memory where he just does not forget. He doesn't forget. And so when I'm asking about, okay, let's talk about what happened in this situation when we had the Farm Bill in 1992 or, whatever it happened to be, why did this situation come up? He actually can go back and tell me why that situation came up and why a certain program was structured the way it is structured. And then he has great ideas on how we can help move it forward, too. So it's been really wonderful to work with him in that way, the institutional knowledge that he has. And he is, hands down, probably the most respected senator of either party in the United States Senate. And I'm not just making that up because this is an election year. He is very well respected because he treats everybody with dignity and respect. He puts thought into his decisions. He takes his time. He doesn't just jump out there and say, this is what I'm going to do because somebody told me to do it. And I appreciate that. And again, he's just been a wonderful mentor for me. And I think just by having him there, he's just solid and steadfast. And many members turn to him for advice and guidance on many issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to Dubuque, Jared
bet.
McGovern.
Hey.
And I thank you for taking the time to talk to me too on the steps, Capitol Hill earlier in June. I ran into you. I'm with the Rubber Museum. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you for also the segue here into the Farm Bill, because I know in Iowa, small businesses, they do require on workforce attraction because of the clean waterways, trail systems, outdoor recreational opportunities we provide, but also Iowa agriculture. The Farm Bill is the conservation bill at the federal level for Iowans. And we rely on our soils to protect that economy just as we do access to clean water resources to protect our workforce. So I'm wondering, what are you and your colleagues discussing as we prepare? I usually don't get nervous speaking in groups. This is weird.
You're doing great.
Prepare for the reauthorization of the Farm Bill in 2023. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much. And I really appreciate that because the conservation title in the Farm Bill is something that's really important to me. And because in the past we have had water quality issues in Iowa, because of the different type of products that we have used in decades past here in Iowa, but as well as our own soils. Our soils have different minerals and properties that are difficult on our water system. So finding ways to alleviate that and do the right thing through that conservation title. So we already have a number of really wonderful programs that exist out there. We are going to continue those programs on into the future. One thing I worried about is that the administration just in the last couple of months, because we have this looming food crisis because of the Russia-Ukraine issue, the administration came back to farmers earlier this year and proposed an idea of allowing our farmers to come out of their CRP programs early without penalty so they could start farming those lands. But my thought on that is CRP is in place because those are vulnerable lands, lands that we don't necessarily want those farmers to farm because it leads to water quality issues, the runoff in the streams that they're adjacent, whatever it happens to be. So I would rather see some of those lands be protected, and let's just approach it a different way if we're looking at upping ag production. So those are some issues we might have to tackle. I know that the CRP program does come up as we're working through the Farm Bill. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about it the right way when we go into those conversations in that title. So I think all of the existing programs that we have there will remain. So that's a good thing. We need to keep promoting the conservation. We've also got other avenues and other funding mechanisms we can use as well. Now, one thing I'm unsure of as we go forward with the Farm Bill is the fact that we did just pass this Inflation Reduction Act. There was a lot of conservation and green climate initiatives in this bill that should have gone through EPW and Ag, but didn't. So now what my staff will do, and committee staff and others, they will have to sort through the bill that will likely pass tomorrow in the House and make sure that we're not competing in different areas for funding for the conservation programs that were pushed through with this bill, which I'll be honest, I have no idea what those programs are and how they're going to be initiated, instead of relying upon the steadfast programs that we know are proven and effective in the Farm Bill. So now that we have this other bill done, or getting done, are we going to defund some of the programs over here? I don't know. So now we're back to square one with some of our discussions, and we'll have to figure out how we move forward. But I'm really hopeful we're going to continue with some of those great programs in the Farm Bill when it comes to water quality and conservation efforts. Really important for us here in the state of Iowa. I know it's important to a lot of other folks. I just think there's a lot of deconfliction now that's going to have to happen as we're going through two separate bills.
Thanks. I'm Phil Boom, president at Emmaus Bible College. We are one of 7 accredited institutions of higher learning in the Dubuque area. Yeah. So the Dubuque area really is for higher ed. And we are enthusiastic about the financial aid, the Pell Grants, yes, that our students get. And contrary to reports, we do not simply raise tuition. the more grants we get. We're thankful for the Iowa
Thank
tuition
you
grant.
for not doing that.
Yes, we do have to raise them sometimes because of inflation. But I'm wondering, can you speak to a little bit about the possibilities? I know there's been some action, but students need it. They're under pressure financially,
Yeah.
and those are important. And of course, the second question, the elephant in the room here, can we get some airplane service, not just
I'm
private
working on
planes
it.
for the Field of Dreams game?
I actually
but
am working on that. I'll get to that
I'm sure
next.
you are. We'd all love to hear about that because, again, on our behalf, for students coming in and out of town, they come from many places around the world to our institutions, and transportation is, really a pain right now.
Yeah, it sure is.
Thank you,
Tell me
Senator
about
Ernst.
it. Yeah, you're welcome. No, thank you. When it comes to the Pell Grant, that is something that I am so thankful for. We have seen so many of our Iowa students that are coming out of high school who may not have had that opportunity to go on to a post-secondary education. And so we are really, really excited that we're able to provide them with that opportunity. However, I still think that as they're filling out the FAFSA and all of the paperwork that goes with that, I still think it's too complicated. We've tried to make steps in the right aid as they're applying for federal student loans, as they're applying for Pell Grant, whatever it might happen to be. We make it really, really difficult for some of those students to gather information and get those grants and student loans. So those are some things that we do need to work through. I think by and large, across the board, if you would query, all 100 members of the United States Senate, I think you will find that all 100 members I'm going out on a limb, but I would guess that all 100 of those senators agree that Pell Grant is extremely important in making sure that we're able to get kids that might have a challenge going to college, getting them out there and becoming productive in the workforce. So I think it's really good. There are a number of other Pell Grant opportunities that we are trying to expand into. Sometimes our colleges may have a little different take on it, but Pell Grant opportunities that go to higher learning in our prison system as well, making sure that we can get higher education to some of those, at least tap into skill certification so that when they come out of the prison system, then they have skills to get a job and hopefully don't end up back in the system. So making sure that skills are out there. We also have an idea of shortening the certification programs or timeline for those that don't get Pell Grant. We want them to get Pell Grant. So there are a number of certificate programs that are short of what is necessary in the number of hours to receive Pell. And what we'd like to see is, okay, here's a certificate program. This is a need in our communities. We want Pell to pay for these certificate programs. So expanding opportunities out there. The goal is not just to get a higher education, but to get a higher education that makes you a productive citizen in a job field or a skill out there that's benefiting your community and society. So I love the Pell Grant and I love the opportunities, and I hope we continue investing heavily in those areas. I personally know a lot of families that would not be where they are today if they weren't able to get that leg up going to school. Thank you. Thanks for what you do. Oh, and then for regional air travel too. So there's a number of different plans that are kind of floating around out there, and one that I've been asked to look at, to work on by one of our regional airports here on the eastern side of Iowa is the number of pilots and pilot qualification for some of these smaller airlines that fly into regional airports. Some of the regional airports are struggling because they don't have air service. Why? Because they don't have pilots. And the reason they don't have pilots, all the pilots are going to the big airlines, and they're flying out of major hubs. And the reason they do that is because they need the really big dollars too. And what we saw a number of years ago, and we can go through the history with you, but there had been an incident maybe a decade ago, and right after that airline incident, they upped the number of hours required for pilots that they had to fly before they could be licensed as pilots. And it increased the cost so much that, Joe Blow on the street can't just go get his private pilot's license or a pilot's license. So we're working on ways to alleviate that, maybe drop the number of hours where they can be a second seater to get additional hours. There's a number of thoughts out there, but we really need pilots. And there's a pilot shortage. The only ones that are really opposed to this, employee unions. They don't want to see more pilots coming into the pipeline because right now they're such a hot commodity. They can demand huge salaries, but then it puts everybody else on the hook. Can't tell you how many times in the last several weeks I've had to sit on a tarmac, waiting and flights are delayed, flights are canceled, you don't have an air crew, you don't have a pilot, have to cancel this flight, now everybody's waiting on the next flight. It's really crazy what we're facing right now. So let's just get more airline pilots out there and then continue looking at some of the other issues that are going on with our regional terminals and figure out how we can make it a little easier out there. But we've got some plans. And we're sorting through those right now. One more.
All right, this is not nearly as exciting as airline usage pilots. But I'm Rebecca Needs. I work for Green State Credit Union. And there is a bill that we're watching Senator Durbin introduced. It's all about credit card interchange fees. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, when he passed or submitted the Durbin Amendment, right, in 2010, we were under the impression that it tamped down the rates that we could charge, but we thought some of that money might go back to the consumers. So even though we fought it, we're skeptical that ever happened, right? So now he's talking about consumers again, but he's framing it in that they need more, retailers need more than one network to send the money over. And I have to tell you, that's kind of flies in the face of the way I see business. We are loaning our members, our customers, money on their credit card, right? It's a credit card. And they're using that to purchase goods. So to tell us what network works best for us, that's not the profit. The profit motive is not there. It's security and safety. And those things continue to not get addressed by Congress. And I know that that's not the issue today. But as long as that's out there, we need to have assurance that we can send the money over the way we want to, right? So anyway, that's just...
Nice job.
Thank you. Just put it in your thinking cap.
Yep, that is an issue, and so we're trying to figure out how we get beyond that. It's pretty hard when Dick is the majority whip, and I really enjoy Dick, and I've worked with him on a lot of different issues, but this is one we just disagree on. But he is in a pretty powerful position in the Senate right now. But so I'm hopeful that if we do see a little more balanced Congress, that we can actually start drawing some of these things to the table and working on it. It is about consumers, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and I appreciate what you do as well. I love our credit union stories, so thank you for sharing that. That was really quick. Good job. Yeah. Chad? So who's going to the state fair? Oh, I should see everybody's hands pop up. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending today. Let's have another round of applause for our senator.
Thank you.
So hopefully you still have a little bit of time where you can take some photos and sign some eggs. So if that's something you'd like to do, please stay afterwards here. But We have some remaining events in this series, as well as our upcoming legislative conference on September 7th. You can use the QR codes on the table tents you might have seen already to register for those events immediately or visit the chamber website as usual. So also in terms of the photos, just wanted to thank Kodiak Creative and Digital Dubuque for helping make that happen. Thanks everybody for being here, and thank you again, Senator Ernst. Thank you.